to Aislinn. Now I'd like to turn it over to Joanne Randall, founder and CEO of Leap Year Marketing Strategies. Welcome, Joanne.
Great. Thank you so much. Thanks, guys. So before we get started, I just want to say that I teach a lot of online classes, and most of the time this is what I see from students. So if you don't mind, letting me see your face, it would be refreshing for me to see actual people face to face while I'm speaking. I do want to let you know, as Lisa mentioned, that there's a PDF that I've provided for the attendees that will help you sort of go through and make notes for yourselves as we talk through some of the material. So feel free to have that for yourself and go back afterwards and fill out some of the questions that I've put there. They basically follow in the order of the slides. And as we go through the material, I encourage you to think through your own organization and how the material applies to you specifically. Everyone is different. Every for-profit and nonprofit is different. And so your strengths and weaknesses are different than other nonprofits. So I encourage you to think through those things, while we're speaking, but also afterwards go back and make some notes for yourself. It's a good reference there. I just want to mention, I am very excited. Like this past weekend was very exciting for me. I graduated the same day with my daughter. She had, a little bit of sunshine there, not a bad thing usually. Graduated with my daughter. She graduated with her bachelor's degree and I graduated with my master's degree, and our graduation party was this past weekend. So that was Saturday, and then Sunday was Mother's Day, and I'm still riding high on that, all that fun that we had. So, and I work from home, and this is my porch that you see behind me, and this is really my workstation. So I get to look out into my yard and look at all the birds. So I really enjoy teaching and helping clients with consulting, their marketing, and I do a lot of other things too. And at the very end too, I'll actually give you some information about an upcoming set of workshops that I'm doing through NHTI. So if you want to follow up further with me, then you can do that. All right, so let's get started. So the information that we're going to be covering this morning is really just one part of a larger discipline of marketing. Marketing can be complex and it has a lot of moving parts. I'd like to compare it to math, and don't jump off if you're not a math person, it's okay. When we're learning math, first we learn that there are numbers, right? And then we learn how to count and we learn how to write numbers. Eventually learn that each number has a value associated with it. And then lo and behold, those numbers with values are somehow related to each other through things like equations and formulas. And before you know it, we're doing calculus and trigonometry. But fortunately, we don't have to be mathematicians, to balance a checkbook. So that's where we're at. I really want to give people an idea that, marketing can have a lot to it. But really, let's start with some of the basic things, because you can't get into calculus and trigonometry until you've really mastered addition and subtraction. And some of you have done marketing before, and that's awesome. So maybe in some respects, this will be a little bit of a review for you, but I've always found that a good review is good for me because it refreshes some things that I may have forgotten. So today we're going to address one aspect of marketing, which is called the marketing mix. If you're familiar with it, it's also known as the 4 Ps of marketing. And the 4 Ps of marketing are product, price, place, and promotion. If you've ever done any marketing work or you research this, you might find that there are other Ps. Some people have expanded on this, but in basic terms, it's the 4 Ps: product, price, place, and promotion. And that's what we're going to cover today. So these are listed in chronological order. So we start with product and we end with promotion. So you may notice in life, we tend to, and I'll include myself in this category, we tend to jump ahead into a promotion. We skip ahead. We think, oh, we need to let people know what we're doing. We're eager to get the word out about what we're doing. So we jump right into promotion. We're not wrong to want to promote, but when we promote before we start to plan, we tend to end up wasting resources such as time, money, and effort. So the first three elements, product, price, and place, are all about planning. So we're going to talk about that today. Much of marketing is planning, actually. All of marketing, in fact, is based on direction that comes from the organization's mission, vision, and core values, which is another topic for a whole nother workshop some other day. But first, the strategic plan for the company is created, and then the marketing plan is created from that. And part of the marketing plan becomes the 4 Ps. So we start at the top and work our way down to the 4 Ps. So before we get into the meat of the sandwich here, I'd like to, first of all, thank Volunteer New Hampshire for allowing me time with you. And also thank my lovely assistant volunteers. We have Aislinn and Lisa here to help me. I will not pay attention to the chat box. I'm sorry, I get distracted. So if there's somebody who needs to ask a question, I'm going to rely on the volunteers to just jump in and interrupt me where I'm at. If needed, it's totally fine. And the question was, what career would you have gone into had you not joined your current organization? So if you haven't done that already, please go ahead and put that in there. I'm going to give you some clues during my presentation as to what I would have chosen for a career had I not gone down the path I'm currently in. So what I'm going to do is I'm now going to share my screen. And we're going to start going through our presentation. And at any point, if anyone has a question, please do me a favor, put it in the chat box. I'll rely on the volunteers to jump in and say, we have a question, and I'll let you know if we will answer it during the presentation, or if I need to answer it right then and there. All right, so let me share my screen. All right, and here we go. Perfect. All right, so we already did the icebreaker. We had some very interesting answers there. And I encourage you to not forget about those careers, because I feel like every 5 years or so, I'm doing something completely different. And it's okay to do more than one thing. You don't have to do everything all at once, but you can do a lot of different things. So we're going to start with marketing mix today, planning for your organization. Whoops, sorry. So the 4 Ps of the marketing mix are really a balance. And it starts, as I mentioned earlier, with a lot of planning. So let's talk about what the 4 Ps are. We have product, price, place, and promotion, which I've mentioned a couple of times already. And the 4 Ps are components of a marketing plan, and they're key. They are key components. They're involved in the marketing of a good or service. Profits and nonprofits will use these 4 Ps of the marketing mix to do a sufficient or excellent job at promoting what they do. Yes. The 4 Ps are constrained, we'll talk about this in a minute, but constrained by internal factors and external factors. And remember, a lot of planning, we talked about, you're going to look at various things internally and externally, and it will help you determine what the 4 Ps are for your organization. And the 4 Ps interact with one another, just like we talked about math and the numbers all kind of working together at some point. The 4 Ps work together in a very similar fashion, but they work in succession. So as we go through our organization and we go through the 4 Ps, we start with product and we end with promotion. Okay, perfect. Significance of the 4 Ps. All right, so remember, many times I'm speaking to people who work in a for-profit organization. And so even though today is different and everyone in the room is typically working with a nonprofit, the principles are exactly the same. They may be called something different, or your approach may look a little bit different, but generally it's exactly the same. All right. So companies or organizations end up using the 4 Ps to do the following things. Number 1, find out what consumers want. We're going to talk about some definitions here in a minute. So you think consumer, we're a nonprofit, we don't have consumers, or we don't call them consumers, and that's true. So we'll cover that in a moment. The next is companies use the 4Ps to identify how their product or service meets or fails to meet the needs of their audience. Right, that's important to know, right? Am I actually meeting the need of the person who needs something from me? Companies use the 4Ps to figure out what the world's perception is of the product or service. And in the for-profit world, that's called positioning. So when someone sees your brand, what comes to mind for them? What is the position you have in the market? Also, the 4Ps are used to figure out where your organization stands versus the competition. Again, another word that seems to should only live in the for-profit world, but in reality, you have competition in the nonprofit world. And we're going to spend a little bit of time discussing that in just a moment. And then also, companies and organizations use the 4Ps to figure out how to interact and communicate with their customers. So pretty important, right? You can see why the 4Ps are crucial. And we want to know, well, how do we find out this crucial information? So before we start that, let's go through a few definitions. So first of all, who is your consumer, your client, or your target market? So nonprofits have many target market. Your target market is the group of people that you are trying to reach in order to have an exchange with them. So that's, marketing definition. So let's narrow it down a little bit. Nonprofits, and this does vary a little bit per organization, but a nonprofit typically has 4 different target markets. Could be more, could be fewer than this. But number 1 is the consumers of the product or service that you create as an organization. So if you're the food bank, then your consumers are the people who receive the food donations from you. So they're the consumers of the product or service. Then you actually have a target market called volunteers. Your volunteers are people that you rely on to get the work done. And as an organization, it's important for you to be clear on how to communicate with them, give them what they need so that they can provide that service on your behalf. So considering your volunteers as a target market allows you to think about your message to them. And again, we're going to talk a little bit more about distribution, how to get that word out. But volunteers, think of them as an actual target market, someone you want to send a message to. The third group is donors. We all know who donors are. And then the fourth group are your board members. Usually you have some sort of board of directors. And so because it's very similar in the for-profit world too. They have consumers, they have employees, they have a board of directors, and they have the general public. And then they also have their target market that they're trying to have a monetary exchange with. So similar, not exactly the same, but close. So you still can consider these groups of people your target markets. Today, because of time, we're going to focus mainly on donors. Of course, we would not be able to function if we didn't have people contributing to our organizations and helping us pay for expenses and supplies and the actual items that we end up using in our organization. So maybe later after we're done, I'm going to give you a quick little homework assignment. One of the things that we do in marketing is we create something called a marketing persona for each of your target markets. A marketing persona, I have it on the bottom there. It's a fictionalized representative of a target market. It's based on demographics, psychographics, and cultural influences. It helps to identify the needs or the problems, the language of your consumers, the language to use, and the methods of communication. So basically, I'll just give you a quick example. Many years ago, I owned a marketing business. And our salespeople were working very hard, bringing in a lot of leads, but we were finding that the majority of those leads weren't a good fit for us. We couldn't figure out why the salespeople were having such a hard time They were bringing in people who just didn't fit our model. So what we did was we did like a little bit of a survey with all our staff, and we said, okay, graphic designer, who do you see as our perfect customer? And that person gave us a description: someone who communicates well, gets back to me within a reasonable time, has the material we need in order to create things for them. I asked our writers, what is the perfect customer or client for you? And they said someone who's clear in their message, they know what they want to say, they know what they're trying to do. So we asked everybody in the organization, and we came up with a list that described the perfect client for us. And we did have to whittle it down a little bit, but generally it described the exact person or organization that we wanted our salespeople to go out and meet and bring in. And it allowed them to focus more on who they were looking for and not think about or sort of eliminate, process of elimination, if you will, the people who would not be a good fit. So it's not 100% guaranteed that it's going to work, but it certainly helps you think through who is a good match for us. So we're talking today specifically about donors. So what I want you to do is, if you have a little bit of time, think about, maybe create a marketing persona for each of these markets that are on the screen now. Who is your consumer? Who are your volunteers? What do they look like? Are they retired? Are they people who work part-time? Where do they live? What are their psychographics? What things motivate them? Also, cultural influences. People who come from specific cultures tend to want to volunteer more because they were brought up in that kind of a culture. So just think about that and maybe do a little bit of homework on your own time there to come up with a marketing persona for each of your markets. All right, let's move on. Oh, and you need a strategy for each of your target markets. That's what I have on here. And we do that because your messaging and your delivery to each of the target markets is going to be different, okay, because they have different needs. So you're going to address them in a different manner. Okay, great. So earlier I mentioned competition, which is an interesting concept in nonprofit world. I'm going to go back here just for a second. I want to have a quick discussion. First of all, the first thing you may assume or jump to is a competitor might be someone who is competing for the donation dollars in the nonprofit world, so other nonprofits. Wouldn't it be great if we could all just market our causes and people would just donate and we wouldn't have to compete for those dollars, right? It's a reality, right? It's just the way that it is. People limit themselves generally on how much they can give or want to give. And so just stick with me for a minute. This is a little bit of a weird concept. I really spent a lot of time thinking about it. So hopefully it makes sense when I say it out loud. So one individual person, okay, one person may decide to set for himself a budget or some sort of restriction, imagined or otherwise, regarding how much money he is willing to spend on non-consumable goodwill, which is basically making a donation to a nonprofit. So each person, based on who they are, their experiences, their demographics, their psychographics, and their culture, they set a restriction on themselves, whether they know it or not. They just do. Everyone has that threshold somewhere in here, okay? It's mainly based on the perceived value to him, the perceived value of the affected recipients, and to society in general. So if I'm thinking about whether or not I want to give, I think about what's in it for me. I mean, that's human nature. What am I going to get out of it? It might not be the first thing that pops into our minds, but it does pop into our minds. What am I going to get from this? And it might just be, wow, this is really going to make me feel good. This is really going to help me reach my goal of whatever. Like, I want to help society. This is going to help me move forward that. And then I think about the benefits to the affected recipients. So the people on the other end who are receiving the benefits from the donation that I make. So those things I'm thinking about, let's say, for example, let's just use the food bank, for example. I make a donation to the food bank. Automatically, I'm thinking about the people on the other end who are possible recipients of that. So that adds value to what I'm willing to donate, okay? And then to society in general. So if I give to a food bank or I give to a nonprofit that is helping people, I'm placing a value of some sort on that contribution to society. So there are 3 different things that I think about when I put some sort of restriction on myself as to how much money I'm willing to donate, to give. What's in it for me, what's in it for the recipient, and what's in it for society. So if someone sets a boundary of, let's say an individual person sets a boundary of $50 and makes the donation, okay, but then he sees a compelling advertisement asking to support efforts to eliminate world hunger, he might decide to donate over his original amount that he set for himself of $50. Why is that? Because somehow that nonprofit, that second one that came along, appealed to his greater sense of value for himself, for the recipient, and for society. They were able to somehow reach him through a message that said, we really need your help and you make a difference. So he said, well, I've already given my $50, but you know what? I really want to do this. And so the consumer themselves, the donor is actually your competition. The person who donates is competing against himself. You have people out there who want to donate and they think they have this restriction on them as far as how much money they're able to give. And maybe they do have an actual restriction, but remember, it's not always about money, is it? Sometimes it's donating time, resources, professional services, okay? So the donor themselves, you're actually competing, 2 nonprofits or all are competing for the donor, right? Not against other nonprofits. You're working to send a message to the donor to let them see that they have more resources. Okay, so I hope that makes sense. We'll go back to it if I need to. All right, so the restrictions that a person puts on themselves is based on perceived value of the non-consumable goodwill. All right, take heart. It's not an impossible task. You can reach the donor in many different ways and touch their heart or get them to motivate them to take action. It's doable, and people do it all the time. Nonprofits do it all the time. All right, so competition seems like a weird thing in nonprofit world, but just think about the donor themselves. You're competing for the dollar from the donor, but you don't have to compete against another nonprofit. You just have to put your messaging together correctly and you'll get there. All right, so how do we get the 4 Ps? Well, the 4 Ps are a result of something called a SWOT analysis. And many of you have actually probably heard this before. SWOT stands for strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. And this is an analysis that an organization does on itself. So an organization will look internally first. They will make a list of strengths and weaknesses. And on your PDF that you have, this is your, let's see, when you get down about a third of the way through the sheet, it says possible strengths and weaknesses of your organization. This is where we could do this. So internally, an organization is going to say, all right, well, what do we do best? What are our strengths? Is it the people that work for us? Is it their specific skill set? Is it our financial position? Is it our current brand? I mean, there's so many things that an organization could list as their strengths, but also it's important to identify what areas are your weaknesses. These are areas it could be, our volunteer base is not big enough to meet the need. We don't have enough office space. We need more time to work on mailing, whatever it is. There's some weaknesses there. It's important to identify them so that you can start to address them. So those are internal. When you've gone through that, then you can start looking externally. And this is where opportunities and threats come into the picture. Opportunities are ways that you can expand what you do, reach different markets, talk to different people, maybe events that you could do, things that you just could do, like opportunities. And you can actually look at your competition. In this case, you could look at other nonprofits, right, and see what they're doing and say, you know what, they do a lot of events and they raise a lot of money doing events. We don't do a lot of events. Maybe we could, that's an opportunity for us. Maybe we could do that. So talking through some of the opportunities. And then threats. In a for-profit world, there are a lot of threats, right? You've got things like legal situations, laws that are passed, restrictions, tariffs, taxes. You've got economic things going on all the time, political things. There's a lot going on. So externally, as a nonprofit, it's important to look at the different environments that are out there to see how they might be a threat to you. It's more so in the for-profit world, but it's a good thing to have as a discussion. And I just put down here on the slide, these are some of the different environments to look at when you're looking at external threats and opportunities. So different competitive environment, economic, political, legal, cooperative. And these are things that you can look up later to get a little more information on. So, all right, you guys are like, all right, let's get to product here. Okay, so you've tuned in for product, price, place, and promotion. So here we go. So nonprofit marketing can seem challenging since an organization must convince its audience to give money without getting anything concrete in return. That can be challenging, right? So the product of a nonprofit is a combination, don't get lost in semantics here, is a combination of tangible representative of the service being offered and the value provided to those who are served. Basically what that means is you are offering a service or product, but usually it's a type of service. So that's your product, but also there might be a tangible representative of that. Let me give you an example. When you go on a trip, my daughter's in a few months is going to go down to Florida. Okay. So when we bought her plane ticket, what were we buying? We weren't buying a ticket. We were buying a seat on a plane, time in the air, and travel, which is not a thing. It's a service. But the ticket we bought, the receipt I got, her boarding pass, all that stuff, that's the tangible representative of the service that we're purchasing. So it's a little bit of a weird concept when you think about it, but there's usually always something tangible about your service. And so it could be something simple like if you send out a newsletter to your donors, thanking them, and maybe after an event, you will send a special newsletter thanking them, sharing pictures that you took at the event. Now, that's not a thing they can hold on to, right? But you're sharing something that feels tangible. They think, oh yeah, that was so much fun. I'm so glad I went. It's like that tangible part of the service that you offer. Another thing that I want to talk about product is your product should fill an existing need. We're talking to nonprofits today, and you guys fill needs. Like that is your thing. You find a need and you fill it. And thank goodness for nonprofits, because I just can't imagine a world without people like yourselves trying to help people who need it, provide services for people, offering people support in ways that they need that they're just not getting anywhere else. So perfect. You guys that's your product right there. That is you. That's your product. And one thing that's an important concept in marketing about product is something called unique selling proposition. We call it USP, unique selling proposition. And in your conversations, when you do your SWOT analysis and you're thinking about your strengths and weaknesses, you can have a conversation about what makes us different from everybody else. There are plenty of nonprofits in the world who work to eliminate hunger. Okay, but why would one person, a donor, give to one and not to another. Maybe they do give to both, but what makes you different? In the for-profit world, it's important to identify USP, because if you have, like, toothpaste is a perfect example, right? If you look at the wall in the store and it's all full of toothpaste tubes and they all look the same, if one doesn't really stand out as being different, you shop on price, right? You shop on price. You're like, what's the cheapest? I don't care. It's just toothpaste usually, right? You might be sensitive about toothpaste, but maybe not. So in the nonprofit world, you can think about what makes us different from other nonprofits, meaning why would someone spend more time and effort and money working with us and supporting us than someone else, than some other group? So it's important to identify that, because that USP is what connects you to your donors. That's why they work with you, because you have that connection. So it's important to put that down into words. And every organization has some aspect of it that makes it remarkable. So it's good to put that into words for yourselves. So here's my first clue about what I would do for a career if I were not in marketing. It's not me, you can tell that's not my hair. All right. So we go from product to price. And so these concepts are interesting because you're not necessarily, as a nonprofit, selling something. So the price factor within the 4 Ps is really about value. So it's your job as a marketer to communicate the value of your service you provide to the cause through donations made. It's important that a donor knows what their donations are going towards. Some people need to know very specifically, other people just need to know in general, but it's your job to let people know. Because if you're clear on the value of the service and the effect you're having, making a real impact, it will compel people to give more than once, frequently, or in larger amounts. If they understand the value of what their contribution made to your cause, to everyone's cause, they will be more likely to donate in the future. And then again, we're not necessarily just talking about money, it's resources and time and professional services, right? So the question I have on this slide is, why does one person donate more dollars or more frequently than another person? Which donor understands your cause better, the one who donates $1 million once, or the individual who donates $200 each month, every month? Now, they both may really understand your cause. My feeling is that the person who donates, and again, we could be talking time, money, whatever, on a regular basis, every month, forever, right? They are bought in. They are 100% in with both feet because they see the long-term value of what you're doing. You've got other people who might donate a large amount of money or a small amount just once. They understand the value of what you're doing, but they don't see how they're making a difference necessarily. So it's your job to communicate to them your donation had an impact, because that will then encourage them to donate again. I just have another little comment here about tangible portions of your intangible product. We talked about the plane ticket. Thank you cards, email marketing, thank you, pictures, anything at all that you can give to people to follow up, to represent the tangible efforts that you're making on their behalf with their donation, will solidify your relationship with them and will encourage them to donate a little bit more or more frequently. All right, so we talked about unique selling proposition. Okay, product, price, place. Here we go, place. Now this is actually, place means distribution. In the for-profit world, place means where do you put your product so that the consumer can get it. For example, Coca-Cola. Well, you can buy it by the case at Sam's Club. You can buy it from a reach-in cooler in the grocery store. You can buy a case in the grocery store. You can buy it at the convenience store down the street. All different places that you can find this product. In the nonprofit, it becomes Sorry, a little bit of a twist on the definition. So distribution can refer to the efficiencies of operations. So donors want to know, well, what percentage of the donation I made goes directly to the cause? That's part of distribution. Like what percentage is actually going to the cause and what part goes to administrative. Most people understand, I think, that there's a certain part of money that they donate is going to pay for administrative things or whatever. People understand that. But sharing that information with them is very important because it helps them see that you are distributing the resources efficiently. And so my next question is, how do you distribute your services? Frequency, location, depending on who you are and what your services are. You're probably dealing with some major logistics here, right? You've got events that are going on, you're at shows, you're probably everywhere, right? And then not to mention, you've got internet. Okay, now distribution of services has been very challenging over the last year and a half, and we're not going to jump into that right now because we're moving forward. But you really need to think through in the 4 Ps while you're doing your marketing planning, how are we actually distributing our product or our service? And how are we distributing the communications to the various target markets? Remember, we said you have your donors, your people who are recipients, then you've got your all the different target markets that you're working with. You need to distribute and communicate to each of them, and that should be part of your distribution strategy at all. And do people have access to you and your services all the time? Like, this should be in your marketing plan. Think about the limitations you have of time, location, space, resources. Let's just continue with the food bank. How do people get donations from the food bank? Does it get distributed? Do they pick it up? Is it at their home? Do they go to the grocery store? Like, you have to have that planned out. Your distribution strategy should be part of your place here of your marketing plan. Okay. And then think through some of the tangible and intangible pieces of your product. And if you're not giving out a tangible piece to your intangible service, think about how you could do that. What could you give your donor as a tangible piece to thank them or to represent the intangible service that you offer? Okay, so far so good. There's another clue as to what I would do for my career if I did not go into marketing. All right, so next we have promotion. So this is the part that everyone loves. Everyone loves to do the promotion part. Usually we jump right in, but you can see how we really just touched on some of the very basic pieces of the 4 Ps so far. If we were to go deep dive into the 4 Ps, we could spend days going through all of them. And all those first 3 pieces are planning. All planning, all discussion, writing everything down, making decisions, figuring out who's going to do what and when. Okay. Then we come to promotion. This is the part most of you are familiar with. And so in the marketing mix is something called the promotional mix. And those are the 5 elements of promotional. And you're very familiar, I'm sure, with some of these. The first is advertising. So advertising generally is what we see, on TV. You might see billboards, magazine ads, that sort of thing, maybe Google ads. And the point of using advertising is to identify the brand. All right. Remember, we talked in the very beginning about positioning. When someone sees your brand or hears about you, what comes to mind for them? What are they thinking about? So advertising is used specifically to position your brand somewhere that you want it. Like, you want to be known as the blank nonprofit, whatever that is for you. Okay. And so that is the point of advertising. It tends to be a little more expensive because you're reaching large numbers of people. And it's a mass communication. Think of it as a Super Bowl ad, right? That's what advertising is right there. The second major element of the promotional mix is sales promotion. Okay, so think about the trade show, right? Most of us have been to a trade show, and you go. I used to do some work with the New Hampshire Home Builders Association, which was a ton of fun. Those people were so much fun, and we would go to the Home Builders Association trade show, and there would be people there that have this little kitchen set up, and they were cooking food and handing out samples and giving out coupons and doing these contests and fill out this little form and you could win this. And those are promotions. They're usually shorter term. And they're meant to increase demand quickly. So I could fill out a form to win a contest. I'm the winner. I'm like, oh, and that gives me a good feeling about the brand. Probably going to increase demand in a short term. Maybe in the long run, but not necessarily. So the promotion part, the sales promotion part needs to be supported with other advertising for the long run. So let's take a look at the next one. We have public relations. Okay, another one you guys are probably very familiar with, right? I think nonprofits are like expert at public relations. Public relations is part of the promotional mix, but it actually is directed at a very specific group of people. And you typically use media, TV media, but it's for board members, government, local populations. It's for communicating to the general public and those other specific groups to let them know what the organization is doing. It's not necessarily a sales promotion, right? Because you're not asking people for donations right there, but you might be supporting the brand and the cause of the organization through public relations. Could be press conferences, that sort of thing. Press releases is another portion of that. Okay, then we have another thing called direct marketing. I get a lot of rolling eyeballs at this point, but go, oh, direct marketing, because that's what we all get in the mail, right? We all love that, especially during political season, right? So here's a piece of information. If it didn't work, people wouldn't do it. And I know it's irritating, and I'm not necessarily telling you that you need to do direct marketing because it may not be appropriate for your organization, but flyers, postcards, and then electronically web forms that people might fill out. This is direct marketing. You're asking the donor to make a decision right there. You see those political things in the mail, and I just go, oh, and we all throw them out usually. But it's a repetitive message, and it goes hand in hand with advertising, sales promotions, other things that we've done, public relations. People remember those different pieces and parts. So when they see the flyer, maybe it's something that's hanging up in the supermarket, they'll remember the other times that you've had that touch point with them. And then the last part of the promotional mix, the 5 elements of the promotional mix, is personal selling. So up to this point, the first 4 that we have listed there are one-to-many, like it's not one-on-one, right? You send things in the mail, you give out coupons. Personal selling is direct contact with a person from an organization. So you've got folks in your organization whose job it is to raise funds for the organization. That's their job, okay? It's very effective, very effective. It puts a face to the name. It builds loyalty to the brand, to the organization. It allows time for the potential donor to ask questions. So if I see an advertisement on TV that talks about a nonprofit, I say, oh, that's nice, but I wonder how many people they serve. It may not say that in the advertisement. A flyer might not say that. Sales promotion coupon or some mailing or something, it's probably not going to say that. But personal selling, it's like an accountability factor that doesn't exist with the other 4. So when you've got someone who's a director of fundraising of your organization, their job is all relational. Get to know people, explain, have a moment of Q&A, answer their questions about the organization. and they become an ambassador, for their brand. So you've got the 5 elements here of the promotional mix, which is part of the P of promotion, the 4 Ps of the marketing mix. Aren't you glad this isn't a class and you're getting quizzed afterwards? But these 5 promotional mix pieces are, I'm sure you're all familiar with, have heard, and you're very familiar with them. So your job as a marketing manager or someone involved in marketing in your organization is to discover through analysis, through the SWOT analysis, and through discussing the promotional mix here, what is the appropriate mix for your organization? Maybe sales promotion doesn't fit. Maybe advertising is too expensive and you have to spend more time on social media. I don't know what it is for you. Every organization is different, but your job is to figure out this mix, and you will only do it correctly if you've gone through the analysis and sit down and go through each part and say, is this something that makes sense for us? And so I'm just going to jump back real quick and just say, and everything that you do within marketing, I'll remind you, is based on the strategic plan, the strategy, the vision, mission, values of the company, because the marketing plan is created after those are done. And then when you start working on the marketing plan, you start working on the 4 Ps. So we're going backwards there. So your appropriate mix is your job to figure it out. Now that might be some give and take. You may have to do some trial and error. And it might feel painful if it's not something you're used to doing, especially advertising. You have to make sure that you're clear on your message. You're clear on who your target market is. You know what their problems are. You can solve them. And so once you've gone through all those things and you feel good, you've created your marketing persona and you feel comfortable with that, then you can jump in and maybe put some resources towards those efforts. All right. So some other things to consider in marketing. Number 1, determining the demand for your product or service. This is hard. This can be hard. And for some of our nonprofits, in the last year and a half, the demand has been out of control. You've needed to step up and provide services, products, support for people in ways that you've never had to do before. So now that you know that, you have a better understanding of the demand for your product or service that you offer. And in the for-profit world, you have to sell something in order to make some money. In the nonprofit world, you need to have a need in order to go out and fill it, and the donors to support what you're doing. So figuring out the demand for your product or service helps you clarify where you want to establish your resources. Other considerations: create a marketing persona based on culture, subculture, and reference groups. I'll just talk about this for a second. In my marketing classes, we spend a lot of time talking about culture, regional cultures, even in the, as an example, in the city of Boston, you've got different sections of the city that are, obviously they're separated geographically, but culturally, you've got the North End, you've got South Boston, you've got all these different areas of Boston and then Massachusetts and then in New England. And it's almost like you go across the state and you need a passport because you're speaking a different language. So understanding your marketing persona based on their culture is very important. You know more about them. Subcultures are even language related or ethnicity. Even if someone is not originally from another country, they may have that ethnic background that's still part of their culture. And then reference groups is something that refers to a group that you spend a lot of time with that is not related to culture. So for example, a reference group for me might be a group of business owners. So we all have something in common and we can all relate to each other through that. But other than that, like we're very different people. So your marketing persona is very important for you to understand because that will help you understand what motivates people to buy. Let's see, getting a grip on demographics and psychographics of your target market. One of my favorite things to spend time on is understanding what's known as behavioral economics. And it basically comes down to why people do what they do. There are economic theories that support why the brain works the way it does. Scarcity, fear, all those types of things. And it's actually pretty exciting if you get into it. But understanding that a little bit better, why people do what they do, can help you come up with the correct messaging for your organization. And then I'll just mention one more time, do your actions, meaning is your marketing plan, the execution of your marketing plan, does it match the mission, the vision, and the core values of your organization? So going back, you have to have that in place first. That's really the important part. So here's my contact information. This information is available. You can certainly go on my website to get a little bit more info about me or from me. I'm happy to do that. My email and phone number are there. I'm going to stop share my screen here and go into chat real quick because I just want to share one quick thing. I just put it in there. New Hampshire Technical Institute is asking me to do a workshop this fall, 4 different evening or afternoons, I should say. We're going into the four P's of marketing in much more detail. SWOT analysis, which we covered a little bit today, mission, vision, core values, and then the marketing plan in general. So if that's something that you or your organization is interested in participating in, the information is right there. That just got created yesterday. We're pretty excited about it. It's not specifically for profit or nonprofit. It's for anyone who wants to understand the marketing process a little bit better. And in this workshop, we will be spending much more time on individual people's questions, their own scenarios, and helping them work through some of their marketing questions. Okay. That's about all I have for material. I have a little bit of time. I can field a few questions if people have some questions.
We have someone here who messaged me directly saying that they missed your contact info.
Sure. I can actually put that back up. Share. You think with all the Zoom calls we've done over the last year and a half, I'd be a pro, but sometimes I still get stuck on screen share, believe it or not.
It's, oh gosh, it's tough, even still. There we go.
Feel free to drop a question in the chat box if you have, or, if you just want to run through a couple of ideas, if you're doing your marketing plan right now, or you have one and you'd like to just do a quick review, I'm certainly happy to do that with you, and we can talk about some of the things that you can think about to add to your marketing plan. And of course, one of the most important parts of the marketing plan is execution and evaluation. Once you have the plan, you don't want to just stick it up on your shelf, right? You want to actually use it. So part of your plan is, how are we going to do this? Who's going to do it? When is it going to get done? And then how are we going to evaluate if it worked? And then basically at that point, you can adjust your marketing plan. It should be like a living document that you refer back to on a regular basis.
I don't want to take over here, but I do. So we hired consultants to work with us shortly before I arrived at Volunteer New Hampshire, and they did kind of an analysis of what we have so far in our socials, and then they put together all kinds of fabulous materials, and it was just phenomenal. Like I had never used a social media calendar before. That changed the game for us because we have multiple different people working on, the plan that they set forth for us. I mean, I guess I don't have a particular question, but like the planning helped so much, it seems like, compared to, what we were doing before, which I guess was just kind of, posting things, advertising things. But now we have a brand and we're trying to follow through, with that plan. So
right, you need a plan, and it sounds so boring to sit around and plan, but I'm telling you, it makes your life a lot easier because people come and go in an organization, right? But a plan sticks around. So you lay out the plan, you make a decision as a group who's going to do what, when they're going to do it, how we're going to measure it. and then you execute, and then you set in your marketing plan a time where you're going to come back and meet and evaluate. And so part of your marketing plan are key indicators, like if you're trying to increase donations by a certain dollar amount, or trying to increase, number of tickets sold, or whatever it is, have that right in there. And then go back and check. And if it worked, great. But it's also important to identify what does not work, because you don't want to continue to waste resources on something that's not working for you. So the evaluation part of your marketing plan is critical. Otherwise, you're just going to keep treading water, and then you're going to have to explain to your donors, your usage rate on the donations for administration. So I'm all about the plan, and going back and evaluating it, and rewriting it. It's like a continual thing. And what Aislinn was saying is that, you've got a marketing calendar. You can lay out a calendar for 3 months, 6 months, a year. You can put out a calendar for yourself as a reference for, by the quarter. Okay, quarter number 1, we're going to focus on getting new volunteers. Quarter number 2, we're going to focus on events. Number 3, donate, whatever it is, right? And then everything you do in that quarter is focused on the goal for the quarter, that number. And so at the end of the quarter, you go back and say, okay, did it work? Yeah. And if it worked, great. If it didn't work, that's okay too. At least you know what doesn't work, and then you can adjust it for next time.
Yeah, absolutely. I like what Clark just put in the chat too. Yeah.
He said a strong plan is a good proxy for a case statement for donors, followed with a regular proof of performance. And he was also sharing that he led the strategic thinking for a prominent nonprofit and engaged the employees through SWOT mission, values, vision. The plan was done with them, not to them, giving a rich plan and employee buy-in.
Yes, definitely. All your key employees or key volunteers, your leadership should be involved in creating the plan. He's absolutely correct. You need the buy-in, whether nonprofit or for-profit, it doesn't matter. Or your family plan, like you're going on a vacation, right? You want everyone's input because you need to make sure everybody's on board with what you're doing. It's the same thing. The best way to get buy-in is to get people's feedback. Throw out an idea. What do you think of this? How do you think this could work? And some of the most effective one of the most effective ways of coming up with ideas is to role play. If I were a donor, what would motivate me to donate to this organization? If I wanted to volunteer, what would motivate me to volunteer my time for this organization? And just brainstorm, just put it all out there. An organization, when they're coming up with new products to sell, new product development, they could come up with hundreds of ideas for new product before they get one that's really going to work. So you have to have a culture in your organization of planning and being open for ideas, so that people feel comfortable saying, well, have we ever tried this? Or I think we should do this. Or if it were me, I would want it to say this. That brainstorming is good. No, don't shoot down any ideas, because that person has stepped up and is brave and has said, well, if it were me, this is what I would do. And you'd be surprised at how many good ideas are stifled in an organization just because they don't have that open culture of communication. Let people say what they want. Even if you don't go with their idea, it's okay. Maybe the next time they decide to join in, they actually come up with an idea that you think is fantastic and you decide to go with it. Yeah. So the planning part should be open discussion. You do have a group of people who make the final plan, but only after you've received all that feedback from people in your organization. That's a very good point.
Well, I'm really thinking a lot about volunteers and in this conversation, and I know we're talking about donors, but I am a volunteer coordinator for hospice volunteers. So I think about, when they go through the training, it's really important for me to let them know that not only are they volunteers, but they're also ambassadors for not only hospice philosophy, but our organization as well. So I really like to spend some time on that with them, because I think that's part of the nature of what we do. And I think that's one of the ways that we kind of reach out to people too for that particular area.
Yeah, your volunteers are crucial to your organization crucial. And if you're in, I don't mean to flip-flop back and forth, but in a for-profit world, you're talking about your employees, your staff members, everyone from the person who, you know, answers the phone all the way through to the CEO of the corporation. The people that run the organization are crucial. If they didn't exist, we wouldn't exist. The organization would be gone. And so showing them, your volunteers, your staff members, whoever they are, not only where they fit in the overall organization, but how they impact the final result of all the efforts that you put in. You know, a little thank you goes a long way. Many times when I've started a new job, or, you know, even with my own kids, most of us can go all day long without being told thank you. But isn't it nice once in a while when somebody says, oh my gosh, thank you so much, even for a little thing. And so the volunteer is giving. They're giving of their time, sometimes of other resources as well. And it feels like you're in constant thankfulness to them. But verbalize it, recognize your volunteers, have a little banquet for them, have certificates, longevity certificates. So-and-so has volunteered 3 years running, or, you know, this person has been in charge of this event for 20 years. Just recognize them, because they will probably do it anyway. But to recognize them and thank them and give them something in return is just solidifying for them that they've been doing the right thing that they've wanted to do all along.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, thank you. One last call for any questions or comments before I give you some reminders, and anyone else right now? Well, Joanne, thank you so much again for letting us join you today. As a reminder, the recording of this session and the slides will be shared at volunteernewhampshire.org. And we'll send an email out to you as soon as they are posted. So make sure that info@volunteernewhampshire.org has been added to your safe senders list so you don't miss it. We also have registration is still open for some of our excuse me, remaining Governors Conference sessions. So we hope you'll sign up for them if you haven't already. In the chat, you'll see a link to a survey when you can tell us about your thoughts of this session and others you attend. You can come back to the survey multiple times or wait until the end of the conference. The link is the same either way. And if you fill out the survey by May 31st, you will be entered in to win a prize. And also, for another chance to win, you can submit an intent to nominate form for the 2021 Spirit of New Hampshire Awards. This is an opportunity to recognize an outstanding volunteer, group of volunteers, or an organization that champions volunteerism. And just to be clear, this is not the count as nominating, but it allows us to reach out to you once we begin to officially accept nominations, sorry. And thank you very much for joining us today, and enjoy the rest of your day.
Thank
Take
you.
care.